So the first question that we're working with today says, high government expenditures can lead to a bigger, which one of the following? So it says revenue for number one, stimulus for number two, deficit for number three, and surplus for number four. And so, looking at the answer choices, we can eliminate some of them. So number one, revenue really refers to the government's income through taxes, right? Like that's the government's major source of income every single year, and then you can think of government expenditures as its spending. So it's just like we have income and spending, government also has income and spending. So revenue is going to be more on the income side, less so on the spending side, right? And so government expenditures is going to be pretty independent from how much revenue is generated. Number two is stimulus. This is something that is a little bit more tricky. Stimulus refers to basically allowing the economy to grow a little bit faster, and so high government expenditures can lead to a bigger stimulus. And so we're going to keep an eye on the answer and see if we come up with any better answers. Third is deficit, and so deficit is again another great answer because the deficit is made up of when government spends more than it receives in taxes, and so when expenditures are greater than tax revenue, you have what is known as a deficit. And so obviously by increasing government expenditures, we would also expect to see larger deficits, holding tax revenue equal, right? And so that's something that we want to be definitely considering very heavily, and we're going to revisit stimulus and deficits as our two final answer choices. And finally, for surplus, high government expenditures can lead to a bigger deficit for sure, but a surplus is actually when government expenditures are less than what the government receives in tax revenue, and therefore the government actually has money left over that it can use to apply to, paying off debt or something like that. So we would expect government expenditure to actually be low when we're dealing with a surplus rather than high, and so we're not going to be picking between that and surplus. So we're left with stimulus and deficit, and so between these two, stimulus is going to be a weaker answer just because it's not a direct correlation where government expenditures are tied to stimulus. It's often that government expenditures can be high with the intention of creating some sort of economic stimulus, but they are not tied in the same way to this concept that deficit is, where government expenditure is literally a part of the formula to calculate deficit, where deficit is equal to tax revenue minus government expenditure, right? And so in that sense, if you increase government expenditure, you by definition are leading to a greater deficit, holding tax revenue equal. So that's probably going to be the best answer, and we would go with that for this question. So let's take a look at the answer choices. And so the answer choices provided by the previous tutors say deficit, which is good. And they say government budget balance, also known as the fiscal balance, compares the revenue generated by the government through its nominal charges on public services and goods and through tax receipts, the expenditures that the government makes. Exactly. So that's so far so good. Government budget balance is positive when revenue receipts exceed expenditures, and negative when revenue receipts are less than the expenditures. If government expenditures are high, it can lead to a bigger deficit provided expenditures exceed revenues. A negative budget balance is known as a fiscal deficit, whereas a positive budget balance is known as a fiscal surplus. And so we can clarify one thing, just to make it absolutely clear that the budget balance is equal to revenue minus expenditures. And so otherwise, great answer. And so we wanted to clarify that relationship just to make it super, super clear. But other than that, this is a spot on answer, and we find no problems with it, right? So we're going to mark that correct, and we can move on to the next answer.